I mean, you bringing up a lot of points that are very important, particularly for education in our city. But for the black parents, outside of all those things that are happening, Stephen Biko said that the most powerful weapon in the hand of the oppressor, it's not a gun, it's not a bomb, but it is the mind of the oppressed. We have given over our children to other folks who clearly do not have our best interests in mind. We get very excited about the charter schools that are here, but the charter schools really remind me of something I read in the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said that there were whites who would come around down there in Baltimore and say, hey, man, how do you feel about the slavery that's going on? You a slave for life? Well, look, how about I help you run away? Right? So they would help these enslaved Africans run away, only to turn around and turn them in and get the reward money, right? So we see the charter schools that have come here, right? They are cashing in off of the pain that our parents are already feeling, or we're feeling, from the public food system. And now they're getting the same thing, the same warmed over soup from different chefs. You understand what I'm saying? So now they're doing it for longer periods of time. So the students are getting out of school at 5 and 6 o'clock at night, but it's still the same miseducation, and you can do a lot better. And if we think these schools are doing good, they're not on the whole, right? Vast majority of the people who are graduating from college graduated from high school all over the country, about 65% of them, the last study showed, has to take remedial classes once they get to a 4-year university. And the students that go to a 2-year or community college, 85% of them have to take remedial classes. So you have to ask the question, what the hell are they teaching our children in these schools that when they actually go to college, when they actually graduate, they have to do high school work over again? Right? So we can do a much better job of that, and by giving our children an education for liberation, not an education for the subordination that we're getting in these schools. And we have to educate our own. It's not as hard as many people think it is. It's not as expensive as many people think it is, but it must be done. It has to be done. You don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to be a person, you said, a lot of people say, well, I don't know everything. How can one person be an expert in everything? Look, you are not necessarily going to be a teacher of every subject. You are a facilitator for your child's learning. Your child loves learning. That school system ain't into teaching them. They're into schooling them for a standardized test that is not about learning. It's all about, filling in a bubble sheet effectively. So you can do a much better job of educating your own child in your own home or in a homeschool collective. They're popping up all across the city. We got Kamali Academy on the West Bank. You have Nature's Genius over there in the Ninth Ward. You got Kaumba Academy out there in the East, man. So we have some African-centered schools, some different environments for our children that is very loving, that is holistic, that is waiting for us to make that decision, to say, you know what? Enough is enough. We have given you enough time to see what you can produce. Right? And you are not producing the kind of Africans we need. We need the kind of Africans who will be able to understand the problems of our community and have the want, the willingness, and the motivation to go ahead on and try to solve those problems, and not just be a clog in the wheel of an economic system that is already falling. Our children are being taught to be servants of other people, and that's no different from our enslaved ancestors. Our school, we want to get to the point where the schools that we train our children in are schools that don't even have to have a certificate. You know why? Because we will be certified by our community. Excuse me. Our schools must be places where our children are learning to build institutions for our community, to do practical work for our community, so that when they come out of those schools, they can actually go to work for their community and not think that, the only way I can get a job is to work for white folks. The only way I can get a good house is to live by white folks. The only way I can get some good food is to go to a white restaurant. We need to be able to educate our children in a way that they love themselves, that they don't feel like they need to go outside of their community to get anything that they need. And the only way that's going to happen is if we do it ourselves. There's no other way. There's no other way. I mean, anything that you want to do, I like to use this model whenever I'm trying to make a decision. Anything that you want to do, there's a model called the GROW model. It's GROW, right? The G stands for goal. What is your goal, right? What do you want to achieve? For us, when I first started school, I said, I want to educate our children for liberation. I want them to get that kind of education. The education that teaches them how to be revolutionary, the education that teaches them how to deal with the challenges that we face in our community. That's my goal. right? Then you have to deal with the R, which is the reality. The reality is that the schools are not teaching our children very effectively. The reality is that our children are coming out able to pass standardized tests, or not able to pass standardized tests, but they definitely are not educated. They know nothing of themselves. They know about George Washington, but they can't tell you nothing about Fred Hampton, right? So that's the reality of the situation. But then you go to the O, which is the options. Okay, what's the option? We could put our children in private schools, usually religious schools, Catholic schools, and many of us, even in the conscious community, are putting our children into Catholic schools, and we're not even Catholic. We don't even want to deal. You don't even have nothing to do with religious institutions or Christianity, but yet we'll still send our children to these folks for some reason, from some kind of rites of passage we feel like they have to go to, right? We can keep our children in the public food system, not working. We can send our children to the charter schools, which have some of the worst teachers in America with the Teach for America teachers, who don't even know how to teach our children, who are there for a year or two just to get their loans repaid. We could do that, but we can also start our own institutions, right? So that's our options, right? Then we go to the W, which is the way forward. The only sane way forward that African people have in this society, if we want our children to get education for liberation, is to build our own. It ain't gonna be easy, right? And it ain't, but guess what? It ain't that hard. We can do it ourselves. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to deal with the situation, and the situation we see in the streets every day. But a lot of people, when you talk about homeschooling, you talk about educating our own, you say, well, what about socialization? They ain't gonna be able to deal with nobody else. What we have to deal with is the fact that socializing and socialization are two different things, right? Socializing is about playing with, talking to other children or other people, right? You don't have to be in a school to do that. Socialization, on the other hand, is about teaching your child or a person to understand the values and the behaviors of this society and follow those rules. And to be socialized in this country for African people is to be servants of other people, and we need our children, again, to be revolutionary. So I would rather have my child myself and socialize them or civilize them under my watch than to have them to be socialized in the public food system. And we don't know what's going on the playground. We don't know what's going on in the classroom. We don't know what's going on in the bathroom at these particular schools. Yeah, you right. Understand what I'm saying? So we gotta deal with that. If we wanna grow as a community, look at your goal, look at the reality, be realistic about your options, and then find a will and a way to move forward on that thing that you believe is right. We cannot look outside of ourselves for the answers, right? There was a merchant in his ancient city. He was walking down this road to this new city, and he saw a beggar sitting on a box by a tree. The beggar asked him for 25 cents. The merchant said he doesn't have 25 cents. He's going to the city to work to make some money. He said, maybe you should look in the box that you're sitting on. The beggar said, nothing's in the box. It's an empty box. Why would I look in the box? He said, I think you should look in the box. Maybe something is there. The beggar agrees, turns over the box, and the box is filled with gold. But he was just asking the merchant for 25 cents. We have to stop looking outside of ourselves for the answer. If you think something is wrong with your community, you made an observation, you got an obligation to do something about it. If you believe the brothers are not getting what they need, then me and you, us, all of us, need to start a rites of passage program that will get them what they need. We need to start our own schools, again, that will get them what they need, because like you said, if we keep listening to the goddamn white man, we ain't gonna get nowhere. So we gotta do it ourselves. It's a very simple thing, but we're gonna have to have the courage. And is there anything more frightening than to walk in your own light and to walk on your own knowledge and to be courageous enough to do what your passion is? That's what it's gonna take. But for us to get out of this situation, we gotta do it. You will be very, very hard pressed to find many African people who are college educated who are any good for black people.
Come on with it now.
Because, I mean, if you do good in the public food system on a high school level, what are they going to do? They're going to reward you with what? More miseducation. And if you do well on the undergraduate level with that miseducation, what are they going to do? They're going to give you more miseducation in graduate school. Children, the schools that our children are going to, even the best schools, are not geared to help us understand who we are, understand where we have been, and understand where we are going and where we could go if we put our mind to it. Those schools are not doing those things. Langston Hughes said it a long time ago, he said, don't look for your leaders from colleges. you're only going to get cowards. And there's a point, you know, they might just say, you know, oh, I'm being cautious, brother. See, we got to play the game like this, right? But there's a point when caution becomes cowardice, and you're looking really like a coward right now for most of those folks. You know, and some people say you gotta pick your battles. But when you say you're gonna pick your battles, you know, that presupposes that at some moment you actually gonna fight a battle.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what I'm saying? You gotta fight one. Which one you gonna fight? You say you know you gotta pick them. Which one you gonna pick? We waiting on you.